Welcome to Gaslit Nation. I am your host, Andrea Chalupa. We talk a lot on this show about making art and the power of art. This special discussion is about artists. It's for people who want to be artists. It's for artists at all stages of their careers. It's for people who love and consume art. It's a discussion about the value of mentorship as well and why that's important to the whole process of creating art. And the way to get to the heart of being an artist, why that's important, what that means, the practical ins and outs of how to do it, we're going to talk to an artist who believed in me very early on, and that alone helped me learn how to take myself seriously as an artist and bring that out into the world. So here's Artist Mentorship 101 with Gaslit Nation and our very special guest, my longtime friend and mentor, Nelson George.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Nelson George is the author of several histories of African American music, including Where Did Our Love Go?, The Rise and Fall of the Motown Sound, The Death of Rhythm and Blues, and the classic Hip Hop America. He has published 2 collections of music journalism, Buppies, B-Boys, Baps, and Bohos, Notes on Post-Soul America, and the recent The Nelson George Mixtape, which is available through Pacific Books. You have to sign my copy before you leave.
There you go.
He has written several novels with music themes, The Accidental Hunter, The Plot Against Hip Hop, The Lost Treasures of R&B, and To Funk and Die in LA. In television, George was a producer on the Emmy Award-winning The Chris Rock Show on HBO, a producer on Hip Hop Honors on VH1, and executive producer of the American Gangster Crime series on BET, so he's no stranger to the themes here on Gaslit Nation. As a filmmaker, George has co-written the screenplays to Strictly Business and CB4. He directed Queen Latifah to a Golden Globe win in the HBO film Life Support, which he also co-wrote. He has directed a number of documentaries, including Finding the Funk, The Announcement, and Brooklyn Boheme. Nelson was a producer on the award-winning documentary on Black music executive Clarence Avant, The Black Godfather, for Netflix. His theatrical documentary on the ballerina Misty Copeland is a must-watch film, especially for children, called A Ballerina's Tale. He was a writer and producer on Baz Luhrmann's hip-hop-inspired Netflix series The Get Down, and was also an advisor on an upcoming Elvis project by Baz Luhrmann. Currently, he's working as an executive producer on a documentary series about Tupac Shakur being directed by Alan Hughes. And to add to this illustrious biography, Nelson has been helping me for a million years navigate the wily world of getting Mr. Jones written and produced. That's now a very important footnote to your biography, I must say.
Yeah, that was good. You got that done, baby.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you see Mr. Jones and the fact that Gareth has a camera in Ukraine, which he didn't historically on that trip, that was Nelson saying, give him a camera. And now there's a camera in that film. And it's the poster of the film. It's like,
That's right. That's so funny.
So Nelson and I met in New York in the summer of 2002. This was the first summer after 9/11, when New York, like now, was coming out of trauma and grappling for meaning. We met at Sounds of Brazil. It was at a Cody Chestnut concert.
Good memory.
You and I were some of the few people actually watching the artist on stage. Everyone else was busy networking because it was an industry showcase event or something like that. I had no idea who you were. You were writing into a reporter's notepad. So I, being the firecracker that I am, came up to you and said, are you a writer? I want to be a writer. How do you become a writer? Da, da, da. And the rest is history. And here we are.
Well, I'll tell you something funny. That same story is how I met my mentor.
Are you serious?
Yeah, there's a guy named Robert Rocky Ford who died a year ago during the pandemic. And I was at the Beacon Theater, I'm saying 76, 77. I was a sophomore in college. And, you're in the Beacon Theater, Graham Central Station, a great funk band is playing, and there's all these people dancing. And there's one guy, 5 rows in front of me, writing in a notepad. And I said, I got to be a music writer. And I followed him out after the show.
Oh,
and
my
I said,
God.
yeah, I'm a college student. I have these clips from my college newspaper. And I sent them to him. He read them, thought I had promise, and he brought me in. And I became that's the beginning. I became a mascot of Billboard. And I started the 2 areas that were really wide open, disco and heavy metal. So I wrote for the disco section. I went to gay discos and reviewed First Choice. I also remember vividly being assigned to review Ted Nugent at Madison Square Garden was AC/DC opening. One of the loudest, you can't imagine how loud that was. And so that was the beginning of my career, was basically seeing someone with a notepad and following them out. So there you go.
It's the circle of life.
There you go. Absolutely.
No wonder you took me seriously, because you could have been like, buzz, scram, but you're like, all right, you got to repay it.
Yeah, no, but when people, it's a vibe thing,
So your experience coming up as a young unknown in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, with all these other young unknowns,
right,
like Spike Lee,
right,
the Marsalis brothers, Lawrence Fishburne. Who else was there? There was
Jesus. I mean, who wasn't? I mean, from Vernon Reid, there is a whole world of Jerry Allen, great jazz musicians. Wesley Snipes had a big brownstone in the neighborhood. God, I mean,
Rosie Perez,
Wendell Pierce. I mean, I can go on. I mean, there's in Brooklyn Bohemian, we only had about 11 out of probably we could have had another 200 people. There were that many. Saul Williams,
Erykah
Badu, Common.
So it was like 1920s Paris, but set in Fort Greene, Brooklyn.
It really was interesting because, I would say I moved into the neighborhood in 85, so it was already percolating. And then Spike did She's Gotta Have It, because a lot of it was shot in the neighborhood. So suddenly people start hanging out there more. Spike gives really good parties, so more people are coming. Oh, this is a cool area. And so it begins to percolate. And then you had the poetry thing. There was a spot called the Brooklyn Moon. Out of that one spot, Erykah Badu did Bag Lady there. Saul Williams started his career there. So there were several waves of people who came through the neighborhood. And I would say it probably peaked out around 1999, 2000. So there was a good 15-year run.
I think what's important for people to know is that Spike Lee, who's synonymous with Brooklyn, his first big feature film launched the independent film industry in America.
It also independent film, but it also launched the neighborhood, and it was inspiration. I'll tell you, for example, She's Gotta Have It. It opened on 66 and Broadway, which was a really cool indie theater. It's the same place you'd see Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. Like when the movie opened, there was a line outside. Of nothing but Black people in their 20s and 30s, up and around the corner. And Spike would be out there giving out buttons and, hey, I'm Spike Lee. He was really working the crowd. And it felt like a generational coming of age. So then at one point, I forget when he had the party, but there was a screening of She's Gotta Have It. And there was a party at the Puck Building. And the party he had there, everybody from Reggie Hudlin, who was coming out of Harvard University, wanted to make movies, Fab Five Freddy, athletes, writers. It was just this thing that it felt like, oh, this is our moment. Because She's Gonna Have It had the Buppy, had the B-boy, had the Bohemian girl, had all these different types that were, in a way, new kind of types of Black people. Certainly ones that were very endemic to New York at that time. We all could see ourselves as one of those people. It felt like us, our generation. And so all of us saw potential for, like, a guy we know who lives in a little apartment off DeKalb Avenue just made a movie that's in fucking theaters. And so that was a big generational sense of, we can do this. And suddenly you see Hollywood Shuffle. You see all of these other movies start coming out. But Spike is the big bang of possibility. And also, as you said, it was a big bang of possibility for young Black filmmakers, but also for women filmmakers and lesbian filmmakers. It was this idea because all of these people who'd been outside, and even American indie film, got to remember, American indie film was still very white, and it remained white for a long time. You think about the typical Sundance film with some white guy in the suburbs trying to figure out, his angst-ridden life. That was like every fucking movie at Sundance.
And that's who programs the festivals.
As well. So those movies, and it was a self-reflective thing. And the people who financed the movies were that guy. So Spike's movie was a big blow. I worked with him actually on a book, Spike Lee's Gotta Have It, which I did the intro to, and there's a long Q&A with me and Spike in it. And that book was taught at universities for years as an inspiration for indie young filmmakers. And it was interesting, I'll tell you the great story, how I thought She's Gonna Have It, because it's very emblematic. Fort Greene at that time, now everything's $3 million, $5 million brownstones. That time it was empty brownstones. It had really gone down in the 70s. It had been kind of gang-ridden. So between me and Spike was a place called Myrtle Avenue. Back then it was called Myrtle. He lived on the other side of Myrtle. So I go to his apartment. It's not even in the house. It's like the garage in the back of the house. So all that's in there is a bed, a giant poster of Michael Jordan, Laserdisc player, which was the, if you're a filmmaker back then, Laserdisc was the official format, and a giant Steenbeck editing machine, which no one has seen in years. But back then, so he literally had these big reels of film. He winds them up. And the first time I used to have it was on this editing machine in his apartment. And like I said, I'd never seen anything like it. I'd never seen what I consider contemporary young Black New York. Lola Darling was she was a graphic artist. She had an interesting haircut. She was kind of free spirit. Those are the girls who lived in the neighborhood. She was very much like the other women we'd meet in Fort Greene.
And she's the subject of She's Gotta Have It.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's from her point of view, ultimately. And she has 3 lovers, and each lover represents, in a way, a different strata of Black life. There's Morris Blackman, that Spike played. One of the first B-boys, that bike culture, baseball cap, or biker hat, one of the first ones on film.
And what does that represent?
It just represented this kind of emerging kind of street character. He was a hustler, I guess, in his way, but he's a bike messenger. Just a real urban type, listened to hip hop, talked real fast, had a lot of new slang that was everywhere in the streets of New York. Then there's Greer Childs, who's sort of this really buppy. When the buppy was the Black yuppie, he's the aspirational, I'm going to go to Sag Harbor and had a house in Sag Harbor. I got a good corporate job. I'm the Black guy who's benefited from the civil rights movement, but I also feel very entitled.
The neoliberal.
Yes. And then there's Jamie, who's sort of like your everyman. He's kind of a Southern. You can tell he came from down South. He's got good values, a little boring, but solid. And then there's also there was a young female lesbian character. And then Spike's sister, who's kind of a bohemian woman who plays a cello. All of these are very recognizable. They weren't recognizable in a Hollywood movie. They were recognizable when you went out and walked through the streets of the city. So Spike made a movie about us.
This episode of Gaslit Nation is sponsored by Best Fiends, a puzzle game you can play on your phone. We're way past due for a less stressful and more refreshing summer. And when you download Best Fiends, you can give your brain a dose of refreshment all year long. No matter what your summer brings, you can always get some guaranteed fun with Best Fiends. Best Fiends challenges your brain with fun puzzle levels, but it's a casual game so it doesn't stress you out, which is a good thing right now. With Best Fiends, you can solve puzzles, collect cute characters, and play alongside your friends and family. There are literally thousands of levels to play and tons of cute characters to collect. Best Fiends is made for adults, but it's bright, colorful, fun, and approachable for everyone, and it's totally free to download. With thousands of fun puzzles to solve, there's something new every day. Download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play today. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. This Gaslit Nation episode is sponsored by Ground News. The media landscape is fundamentally broken. The press is financially incentivized to push divisive content to generate clicks. Social media further divides people into information silos, fanning the flames of polarization. This is one of the biggest issues of our time. Ground News is working to solve it. Ground News is a news comparison app designed to rebuild a shared sense of reality. Founded by a former NASA engineer, the app shows readers how a single story is being covered across the political spectrum, giving you more context and a comprehensive view of the issue. Ground has an immense library of sources, featuring over 50,000 outlets from across the world in the political spectrum, so you can see every side and draw your own conclusions. Ground is shedding light on the present in order to create a better future. It's easy to use, well-rounded, and consistent, no matter your politics. Try it for yourself by clicking on the link in the description to download the free Ground News app.
That impact of Spike rippled out, and what Spike made clear is that we could take our reality and make it into books and movies and TV shows. There was a route that we had that hadn't been there before. And also, Spike's parallels hip hop's growth. So Spike himself, interesting enough, loved hip hop, but he loved so much other stuff. His came from a jazz family. He wasn't like, I'm just into hip hop. I'm into Black culture in all those different ways. But the hip hop thing also was a sense of, I can tell my own story. So the Black independent film movement starts with Spike and Robert Townsend, and then it goes into John Singleton and so forth, and the Hughes brothers. That's one track. And then you have hip hop, which is emerging in the late 80s, is kind of called its golden age, into the beginnings of sort of West Coast rap. So you have these two things, and they're telling narratives from a Black point of view, and they're creating stars.
And what it did was it turned Brooklyn into a brand.
The Brooklyn we know now, in many ways, begins with Spike, because the narrative around Brooklyn before that, the Dodgers had left in the 50s. By the 70s, it was like you couldn't get a taxi to Brooklyn. Actually, Spike even did a funny little short film for Saturday Night Live about trying to get a taxi back to Brooklyn. It was a joke, but it was also hilarious. You couldn't get anyone to take you over the damn bridge back home if you went out late at night. So Brooklyn had become a no zone, and it become that thing. Unless you went to Brooklyn Heights and hang out with Truman Capote, it wasn't a place to go to. And She's Gonna Have It and Spike's Brooklyn centricness, because, his third film is Do the Right Thing. And then throughout Crooklyn and Mo Better Blues, Brooklyn is a character in almost all his early films, probably except for maybe School Days. So he helped make Brooklyn cool. And Fort Greene then becomes this place where...
Of charter schools.
Well, now, but it was just basically, there weren't many restaurants. There was a key food you avoided, like the plague, if you didn't want to die because the meat was terrible. But they were house parties, and they were barbecues. And some of my best memories of the era are house parties. You could go to a party and there's Larry Fishburne, or Lawrence Fishburne, as he would have you now. And there'd be Lisa Jones, a fantastic writer for The Voice. And also there was a very strong lesbian community. There was a couple of bars there. So it was a lot going on. As the music was going on, the big jazz scene, avant-garde jazz. And then later on, Branford and Winton move over. Winton doesn't like Brooklyn because it doesn't stay open that late at that time. And all it was takeout Chinese. So he left, but Branford stayed there. So Branford becomes an actor through Spike. Branford does film scoring, If you look at the score for Mo Better Blues, that's very much this idea of cool hip hop, cool jazz, all happening at the same time, which it was happening all at the same time in Fort Greene and Clinton Hill. And you could really walk out your door and run into Common, Erykah Badu, Saul Williams, Torre, Chris Rock. But it was also the sense that there was so much going on that for all of the parties and all the socializing, people were getting stuff done. There's an incredible amount of creativity that came out. And so there's nothing like the proximity to other people doing good stuff. I look back now, I remember in 1990, the Times was going to do a big cover story on the New Black Renaissance, they called it. And I remember at the time thinking, well, it's cool, but there wasn't enough work being done. I don't think enough work had come out. But now we can go back 20, 30 years now and say, look at all these movies, look at all these actors, look at all these records, look at all these books, and really quantify that as a incredible time. So when I did the documentary Brooklyn Boheme, we were at the crux. I knew it was turning, and I wanted to get it while I could, because I felt like now it's really ancient history. Fort Greene means something completely different than what Spike created there. There's other thing where they're always predicting people are leaving New York. No, they didn't all leave New York. A lot of them came to Brooklyn. And so if you were someone who didn't want to live in Manhattan, but you still want to stay in New York, suddenly you look over at these brownstones and you're like, wow. And, the point of New York, it's all about real estate. The fact is that people always go to South Bronx was fucked up. You guys never saw the Lower East Side. Look at any videos of Basquiat walking around. That bombed out area is not the Bronx, it's Manhattan. So all the different clubs, the Mud Club and all that supported that art/music/performance scene was all predicated on cheap real estate for artists and cheap rents for clubs.
So do you think that's going to come back now that the pandemic has emptied out some parts of New York?
Well, the parts of New York that have been emptied out will be interesting to see. Midtown Manhattan is going to be interesting. The theaters are going to open up in September, and that will definitely bring back the tourists. I think people are going to want to come back. And I mean, there's already a lot of tourists there now. But the office buildings, all along 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue, all those high rises, there's a skeleton crew of people in there. I just did an interview with somebody at a building on 42nd Street, I think that's owned by Squarespace. And I asked how many people are in the office on this floor. He said, well, it seems like there's only 2 people a day who go in. So what are we going to do once the winter comes? And, we see that really people aren't coming back. Not in the big, I don't think we're ever going to have all those buildings full again. People are still building new high rises. Those are all there's still a lot of construction going on. Can we repurpose those buildings for homeless shelters or low-income housing? The difference is when Soho got converted, when Williamsburg gets converted, all those places were based on primarily pre-war houses, very sturdy construction. It's all these, factories and these old brownstones. So they have great bones, and then you build new buildings around them. Midtown is just all skyscrapers. Do you want to, even as a person who's looking for affordable housing, do you want to live on 47th Street in a 60-story building? It's going to be an awkward conversion. Do we tear those down at some point? Because they're not financially feasible anymore. It's a radical, and that's downtown LA. We spent so much time, it's so funny, getting people to come back to cities. That was a big mantra of the 90s into the early aughts, right? And it kind of worked. So now, but what do you do with all these big buildings? I don't know. I mean, I don't, maybe that's the futurist job, but I'm not quite sure it's the same kind of revival job as you have with these other, lower building, old school neighborhoods that were easily, like, you could look at Soho and see, wood floors. You see all of this different bones that look really cool that you could fix up.
No one wants to fix at Midtown.
No, that's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I've seen the same thing. And like, even I was in San Francisco recently, along Market Street. And, where Squarespace has this fucking gargantuan building there and there's all these skyscrapers. Who's going back into those buildings, especially the tech companies who are already predicated on mobility? Are they going to move all those people back into these buildings now?
Turn them into gardens. Let the deer graze through. It's true, though. It's like community breeds art movements and they feed off each other. But so in terms of looking back now, so practical advice for artists, what were some of the X factors that determined who made it and who didn't?
A lot of it has to do with respect for the art form. The guys and gals who made it, who I see still working that I known since the 80s and 90s, are those who understood the history of what they were doing. They weren't going on, I'm reinventing the game. Whether it was a hip hop DJ who really knew the history of music and how to find the right samples, to the comedian who went back and listened to Lenny Bruce and Bill Cosby and all those different things and studied their technique and prior. Longevity is based on a foundation of quality. You have to understand what good is. You have to have a standard of what good is or great is. To be good is a minimum requirement. To be great is like the next level. But you can only do that through study and meditation. I mean, I really believe that everyone I know who's gone on to have enduring careers is a student of something. The folks who didn't make it were those who thought it was all about them and all about their moment. It's like running into the old MC who's still telling you about the record they made in 83. And you're like, well, that was a great record. But, did you evolve out of that? What was your foundation? I think that's one of the fundamentals is understanding the craft, the history of your craft. Good example. So Chris Rock is an up-and-coming comedian in the early 80s. And then he has a stumble. Then he gets on Saturday Night Live. Doesn't really become a star on Saturday Night Live, though he's on this big platform. So then Chris decides, I'm really going to be a great stand-up. And what he starts doing is listening to Pryor, Cosby, the great white comedian, Sam Kinison. I mean, he's studying all of this stuff. He builds a little stage in his house with a mic and a mirror. So yes, to watch himself, because he's a good jokester, but he's not a good performer. So he's like very focused on performance and energy and how to keep energy on stage. And he really says, I want to be great, but to be great, I have to understand what people define as great. And why is this great? By these standards. He's already a good writer, he becomes a really good writer. And he understands that joke works because of where the words are. In a joke, if you have one word too many, you mess up the line. If you have one word too few, what's the rhythm? You set up, payoff. Okay, how do I set this off? How do I have a little joke here, a little laugh, and then boom. So he really becomes an incredible student of structure. And almost everything is writing. The great songwriters are great writers. And whether that's how they use lyrics or how they use structure within song construction. Obviously in screenwriting, there's different disciplines to the different art forms, but it still comes down to how to tell a story. So Chris is a great example to me of someone who, I have a voice and I know what I want to go, but I'm going to take the lessons from what happened before, see how that was done, and then extend. And, Prince was like that. Prince had, an incredible amount of knowledge. I mean, he didn't really admit it when he was younger because, it was all the mystique, but he listened to everything and was very aware of, okay, this is a Beatles chord. I use the Beatles chord, but this is a Stevie Wonder chord. No, this is like Santana. And if you listen to his songs, they're beautiful pastiches. He had a wider range of reference than almost anybody I know of and was able to create his own voice through them. So yeah, I think the foundation for artists is knowledge of history or knowledge of art. Because you go back to Hemingway, a lot of his reference points were painting. Cezanne, how much do I need in a painting? How much do you need to create an image that's memorable? Like I was amazed when you go see a great painter and you look, that looks like a wall of geese, but it's actually on close a bunch of little dots. How do you do that? How many dots do you need to make something look like a geese? That you stand from it's a geese. Like those are the nuances. And as a guy like Hemingway, how many words do I need to make people feel this? So they're kind of both inspirational and clinical because there's a certain level of analysis and also, I think, honesty about your own skill set. Who the fuck are you? What do you really have to say? What moves you? You really have to have a great deal of self-awareness. That comes with trial and error. But definitely over time, and for me, I know there are things that I can do that no one else does. For example, there's a ton of people who talk about the politics of race. They don't need me to be that guy. What I need to do is go through the things I know. I love music, I love sports, I love culture, and delve through that. And all the other things are there in the narrative because they affect the creation of these art forms. But going through that door makes to me, more unique. And so I don't want to be on CNN, talking on a panel of people about whatever hot. I want, when you see me on TV, I'm always talking about some shit I really know. I'm not an opinionator. I want to say I'm an expert in this. And when you're getting is a really thoughtful analysis, but so I'm very particular about what I talk about.
So to be an artist, to find your voice in the world, go narrow and deep.
I think that's the way. I always say, okay, what is it that you do? Because there's always people who want to be a producer. Okay. So, all right. What are you bringing to the table for this production? Why are you here? And if you can't answer that question and fill a slot that's not being filled by someone else, you shouldn't be on that project. Whether you're a talking head or a producer, what do you bring to the table? And I always ask myself that about projects I'm involved in. I'm also very aware, let's get into this, the art of collaboration.
Which is an absolute art form. Collaboration is everything for the artist.
So I've been a boss. I've been a cog in a machine. I've been just an adjunct to help people get their money. you really have to understand why you're there and what you're trying to achieve. So when I work with Chris doesn't need me to write a joke.
Chris Rock.
Chris Rock doesn't need me to write a joke. So with Chris, I've basically been an advisor who throws stuff off of me, a facilitator, maybe doing stuff that he doesn't want to do himself. And whether that's either firing somebody, which I have had to do, or helping him flesh out some research thing. And so that's kind of been our, relationship. And we've done a bunch of stuff over the years at different times. And each time the relationship changes also because as he's grown and gone more mature, like CB4, I co-wrote the script with him because I was the writer guy. By the time we worked on Good Hair, I was already a filmmaker as well. So I helped him structure stuff and do a lot of that work for Good Hair. Top 5, I was an associate producer, but now Chris can write his own script. I'm just looking at the script and giving notes and being just a backup to him when he's shooting the movie and making a suggestion here or there. What about this word? So, that's the other thing when you have for long-term collaborations, the relationship changes as people gain more skills. That's a good example of that. When I worked with Misty Copeland on the Ballerina's Tale documentary, she was in a down point. She was injured. There's a sense she might or may not come back. And I said, listen, you're a great story one way or the other. I don't know how I don't know how it's going to turn out, but let me hang out with you. And she allowed me to enter her world and just follow her around with a camera. And as time went on, I was able to raise more money and add more camera people and more sophistication. But it started very, very much me and a little camera just watching her at a rehearsal. And so her only thing was, if we get this together, I have to have control or input into the dance sequences, how they were cut. I'm like, hell yeah. I don't want you dancing off beat. And we had to recut sometimes some scenes if she felt like, no, my leg is in the wrong spot. Very subtle stuff, but that we as laymen would not get. But she totally was like, whatever the rest of the narrative she was good with.
So the theme I'm seeing is the exact science of greatness.
Right. You have to work with each of these individuals. What is your goal with them? Very also define what it is you want out of it and what they need or how you can support them. In a sense, we were collaborators. I mean, it was my film, but obviously I can't do it without her. She didn't have final cut, but the things that she really cared about, I wanted to be sensitive to because that was really her area of expertise. I'm not going to impose my idea about how to shoot a dance sequence. I mean, there was stuff that she didn't want me to do that I did do because she's from the world of the proscenium. So you should see the whole body all the time. And I said, in film, we have an opportunity to do close-ups. There's one big dance sequence in the film that ends on a close-up of her because you can really see her face. And I said, this is an opportunity. We can never see this at the Met, right? So it's back and forth. I worked with Baz Luhrmann on The Get Down, and now I'm sort of a consultant on this Elvis movie. There's a lot of stuff about Baz Luhrmann to say. He's an amazing character. But one of the things is he's very steeped in research. If you went into the offices of The Get Down.
That's your Netflix series about the invention of hip hop in the South Bronx and Brooklyn and in the 70s.
So what I did is I created timelines. I made a timeline of music in New York from the mid 70s to the early 80s. I made a timeline of some social movements in New York. And so we had a wall, which is full of pictures from the 70s. From disco, Studio 54, to Uptown Bronx, to advertising, just everything about just images. And then one timeline was my music timeline. One timeline was sort of the city history timeline. And then the other was our fictional timeline. And what we discovered as we laid it out, when you watch The Get Down, it's not just about the birth of hip hop, though that was sort of a sexy hook. It's about how hip hop rises slowly and disco is at the top. And there's actually an endpoint, which it's not all in the film, in the show, but it was sort of the goal we were driving for. Is in September 1979, I think it was. There's a disco riot in Chicago, where this famous thing where they burn these records at a White Sox game, and then which people sort of is the death of disco. That became the media take. Within the same month, or I think October, sometime within a month of each other, the Sugar Hill Gang record comes out, Rapper's Delight. So, okay, so we're going here. So that piece of true life, then we go backwards and we drive the story toward that. So we built the sort of the narrative of the thing around this endpoint. This disco riot and this record came out within the same period. So that means that the two cultures are crossing. One's going up and one's going down. And so we go backwards and tell the story from there. So, for example, a lot of people complained in the Great Gatsby movie about there's a whole sequence.
Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby.
Right. Where, I forgot the guy who played Nick Carraway.
Tobey Maguire.
He's in this sanatorium.
Yeah.
And people, what does that have to do with? Well, Fitzgerald was in a sanatorium. He used the sanatorium as a sort of a linking device for the whole movie, looking back, because the book is told from the point of view of Nick looking back. So he takes the fact that Fitzgerald was actually in a sanatorium during one of his many drinking bouts and used that as the device. So everything he does is based on real stuff.
Yeah. And Zelda Fitzgerald died being burned alive, trapped in a sanatorium.
Yeah, so that's a big theme in Fitzgerald's life. So that's where that came from. So in the Elvis movie, I haven't seen it yet. He's still cutting it, but Elvis and black people is a huge part of the narrative. It has to be, right? It's a huge part of the cultural dialogue. So I spent a lot of time interviewing black people who knew Elvis and finding black newspaper accounts about Elvis and seeing how in the 50s, black people dealt with Elvis and those who knew him. And I found quite a few. I know we found a black guy, I hope he's still alive, who grew up with him in Tupelo, Mississippi. We found several people who knew him as a teenager and knew him as an adult. And so that's going to inform some of the storytelling.
And what do they say about Elvis?
That he was this weird little white kid. What I got from the people was that Elvis was an outlier. Number one thing about Elvis is how poor he was. His father, was in jail for, I think, writing bad checks at one point. So they lived next to the black folks, where the poor black people were. If you ever have to go to Tupelo, Mississippi, you go down, there's a famous Elvis statue. There's the drugstore that Elvis used to hang out at and got his first guitar. And there's now a big sporting arena. But what a sporting arena was the black entertainment section. It was the Beale Street. And then up this hill was where black folks lived. And Elvis was one of the white families in the black neighborhood, especially for about 2 or 3, I think 9 or 10. So these guys have stories of him going to black tent shows. The little black weird white kid at the black tent show. So, I'm not going to get into all of the stuff. There's so much to say about Elvis. But one thing that's very clear is that he was attracted to this, and not actually soul music, but to church music. And then there's another thing I didn't know about. You've always read these things. Well, Elvis went to black churches when he was a teenager. Well, we found the black church that he went to. And it was a church run by a guy named Brewster, Reverend Brewster, who was the biggest black minister in Memphis. And his church was basically, I walked it, less than a mile from the white church that Elvis went to with his mother. And not only was this church accessible, Brewster had a radio show on the white station in Memphis. And it was a thing for white kids in 1951, 49, early, to go hang out in the back of this black church and hear the singing. And because I always had the idea that maybe Elvis was this singular, but apparently that was a kind of teenage rebellion that was going on in a very segregated time and place. This is really before the official civil rights movement really starts. So this Reverend Brewster was kind of a crossover figure in Memphis, and that attracted white teenagers. One of them was Elvis, and Elvis sometimes took his girlfriend. It just gave me a different perspective on his journey, and so I believe some of that will end up in the movie.
And when's that movie out?
June of next year. So
we're going to get a Baz Luhrmann Elvis film.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
Someone said to me, "Well, you're working on the Elvis thing. You're a traitor to black people." I'm like, really? Is that what this is about? I think the Elvis thing. What I'm hopeful that comes out, and then in that the Elvis movie is an opportunity to have a real discussion about Elvis and black culture and how the interaction. Because I think one of the things that people are doing now is sort of taking art and politicizing art in a way that doesn't, it's a misunderstanding of how art works. And when I say that, to say that if you're going to say that Eminem, takes Black culture, then what's the discussion about, Quincy Jones going to study with Nadia Boulanger in Paris? What does that say about Miles Davis listening to Stockhausen? And, and using all at the highest level of art, the greatest artists take from wherever they feel inspired. Says in Spain, one of my favorite Miles Davis albums is all based on Spanish motifs and Spanish instrumentation mixed in with his own style. Artists take from wherever, always. Now, you can make an argument about the economic injustices of how the music industry works, because almost all Black artists in America work in some form, not all, but the great work in some form in conjunction with European art forms, whether it's gospel music is a derivation coming out of European choral music that we took and refractured the same way that if you listen to Prince, especially his first like Dirty Mind era into 1999, is very influenced by new wave music, the way he uses instrumentation and keyboard. And that was part of one of his palettes, if you will. I hate when this discussion gets so reductive around race and culture, because I don't feel like it's not a one-way street. And in fact, that's the beauty of art, that someone like Ellington, and I'm using people I think at the highest level of art in America, take from wherever and make it their own.
Yeah, like Picasso took from African art.
Absolutely. The issue becomes when people want to deny that. But all you have to do is go see some of Picasso's work hanging up, and you go, oh, that looks a lot, the way he's had the heads, and the way the eyes are situated. Oh, he saw this work, or he saw these sculptures, and he took from there. So that's that. But that's the way art always works. I mean, if you ask me who my favorite writers are, I mean, the reason I became a writer was really Hemingway and then Fitzgerald. It wasn't Baldwin and Richard Wright, though Richard Wright is one of my favorite writers now. The In Our Time collection of short stories by Hemingway was super influential on me, because those deceptively simple sentences, which I found out weren't so simple as I tried to steal them. But that was a big motivation for me to be a writer. The two books that made me want to be a music writer were probably Blues People by Leroy Jones, later Amiri Baraka, and Greil Marcus's Mystery Train. So a white writer, black writer, both writing about music from very different points of view, but both impactful. Everybody starts with an influence, because you have to see possibility. And so I believe in representation and all that stuff, that you have to see people. It really helps immensely. It doesn't have to be. Like I said, Hemingway was a big influence in making me be a writer, and he's about as far from me as possible. But it's nice to see that there was a Baldwin and a Wright and all those folks. So I don't think it's necessary to always have your icon be someone of your race. I think that that's kind of actually reductive. We are human beings, and we take from whatever moves us. The other thing about collaboration is when you're the boss, which I wanted to talk about. So I produce, I direct stuff, and it's my show. So in that world, then you have to be very aware of, am I using the people around me properly? When I say use, I mean, everyone's creative. They wouldn't be in your circle if they weren't. So you have to really be aware of, like, I want this to happen, but I have to be aware of the process of my editor. How does my DP work?
Your director of photography, the guy that holds the camera
Right.
and does the light and understands how the camera works. Yeah.
And how do these actors work? Some actors need a lot more context than others do. Some just want to do their thing, and you just tell them a little more, a little less. Some people really need to know, why am I feeling right now? What am I? You have to have the. So that's part of being collaborative too, is understanding what the team needs, and it's not a one size fits all way to get the best out of people. And my last note on collaboration is, don't work with assholes. And that's hard when you're young, because you need the work. So you have to take whatever you get to start out. And then you often run into like some totally psycho person.
How do you spot those people? Like, what are the warning signs?
How they treat other people. Because eventually they'll treat you that way too, no matter how special you think you are. If you see someone, and not even abused, I mean, it just be like they're kind of make bad jokes, or they whatever their thing is that it irks you. You see them do that to someone else, they'll do it to you.
So speaking of big bad assholes, you worked with Scott Rudin.
Yeah.
Who is now being outed in a very big way with a lot of extremely traumatized former employees coming forward with horrific testimony of violence, explosive behavior.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Yeah, I'll put it this way. Scott Rudin is one of the most interesting people I've ever met.
Scott Rudin, yeah.
He really is. I saw a couple of things. I was like, yo. I definitely saw a couple of moments where I was like, wow, this is crazy.
And that was on Chris Rock's film that Chris wrote and directed, Top 5.
Yeah. But at the same time, he was absolutely one of the most versed, when I talk about writers, you name a writer, a playwright, a novelist, and their work, he knows who they are. He has an opinion on whether they're good or not, why they're good. One of the reasons he was so successful, because basically everybody, the Coen brothers, Wes Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson, almost all of the elite filmmakers who we consider, in that group of sort of art filmmakers in America, they all went through Scott at some point or another, because he has incredible taste. And so, but also conversely, the other part of that is almost all of those guys, after they work with Scott, they don't necessarily go back. Or if they go back, the relationship changes because of all the reasons we're talking about. Everyone wants access to what Scott brings to the table because he's become an elite. He became an elite producer, both in theater and in film, because he really understands writing. He'll make you write your shit over a lot. And I don't care if you're the Coen brothers or Chris Rock or whoever, he's very much a stickler about story. And so that was his superpower. That's why he managed to have the power that he had.
What were his main principles about story? Like, what was he pushing?
Why is this here? Why is this here now in this scene? How much information does the audience need now to understand what's going on? He was really, really good on cutting out exposition. Really, really good on that. And so the things move. All the pieces move in a certain way. And they have I also was around Scott a bit on Motherfucker with a Hat on Broadway because Chris was in it. And I was around, and I know Stephen Adley Gerges. And Stephen is a brilliant playwright, but that's probably the only piece so far that Stephen's got on Broadway. Scott was the producer, and they would do some serious chopping and slashing. Obviously, he's his own worst enemy. He's done horrible things. There's a level of, I guess, general it's well documented. But I gotta say that there's a reason why he was able to get away with it, I guess, for as long as he was, is that for a lot of the creative community, like even, Denzel, he's one who produced Fences. And he produced Fences as a play on Broadway with Denzel, then helped produce the movie version of it. And it's interesting, his Rudin's relationship with people. Obviously, there's a difference between how he dealt with talent and how he dealt with his underlings. And so I think that that's the disconnect that people are going like, well, how did he do this? How did he get away with that? Because like most people who have long careers, they deal with everybody differently. And that's one of the things about any business, I guess, but it's certainly in the entertainment business, it is about relationships. And the people do get shit on the way up. Always, almost always, on some level, someone shits on you. There's always going to be abusive bosses. So you're gonna have to come up with strategies. That's why the asshole rule. Because if you know someone's reputation is that, you really gotta do your best to avoid them if you can. I had a couple of people early on, especially when I got more into film. But I found that the level of abuse and assholeness was higher because the money's higher. It wasn't the same in journalism. In journalism, there were knuckleheads, but they don't make as much money. And so the money makes the entitlement and the abuse more. And also it makes people hang on to the abuse because they're chasing that apple of the big money. So they'll tolerate the abuse a lot longer than a young journalist might, who's not getting that much money. So fuck you.
Well, I want to tell a story about the watch out for jerks rule, specific to you.
Right.
I remember one time many years ago, you and I and our friends, we went to go see a film at the Tribeca Film Festival made by a American guy who was based in Ukraine.
Oh.
And I dragged you and everyone there because I wanted to potentially work with this guy on getting Mr. Jones
Right.
off the ground. This was very early on. I was like maybe 24 years old, like wet behind the ears. I had like it was like my first draft of Mr. Jones was
Right.
written. That was it. So, and I remember we were trying to get into this guy's film, the Tribeca Film Festival. Rolling Stone was having a huge party across the street, and you ditched that party to come with me to this random dude's Tribeca film. And this random dude, when I went into the theater to get our tickets from him, because he promised he was going to get us all tickets, he instead went off on me. He went off on me and just screamed at me, like unleashed like all this abuse on me. And I came out of the theater shell-shocked. And you looked at me and you're like, what's this dude's email address? and I gave it to you. I looked at my phone and I gave it to you. And you start writing an email to this man. And the subject line of your email, from your own personal email address, the subject line of your email, telling very politely, very professionally, telling this jerk off and saying, you do not talk to me that way. Your subject line of this email that you wrote was, this is Andrea Chalupa. And you sent this man this email on my behalf when I was shell-shocked. And then we went to some like corner restaurant and I was like in tears. And then we spent the rest of the night where you telling me stories of all the jerks and all the horrible things that happened to you. But I just remember that moment was so key because you showed me how to stand up to myself, for myself. Like you showed me that. Like I was frozen in that moment, like a deer in the headlights, shocked how things just turned on a dime like that. I thought this person was legit.
Right.
And you even voiced that. You were writing the email out loud saying, I considered you a potential serious collaborator, but what you did was inexcusable. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you gave me the words I needed to understand how to set boundaries.
Right.
And of course, he wrote back apologizing and was really like gut punched by a young, quote unquote, nothing young woman. Because young women, especially in any industry in media entertainment, are seen as disposable. We're objectified.
Right.
Talk about representation. It's so much harder for us to find boss women and to understand like what
Right.
and like, let's be honest, like a sane boss woman. Because some of the women I worked with coming up were crueler than some of the men. And I'm like, did the industry, were you conditioned that way? Is this like hypervigilance talking, trauma talking? So it's very easy when you're coming up as a woman to flounder and not have any anchor of knowing how to set boundaries and how to find your voice and be like, nope, that's not right. And that was a key moment for me. I just want to tell you. Because I was like, oh yeah, you can set boundaries. It's a safe thing to do to set
Absolutely.
boundaries. You don't have to meet their energy level. You don't have to meet their hysteria. You can stay grounded and professional and ice cold and you can remain safe.
Listen, you meet the same people going up. The journey is so long that there's no point in trying to out asshole an asshole.
Right.
But you know, it's you hit such a deep, profound thing with that. It's just so much bad stuff that can happen. So that's why you have to have your sense of what is success. And that's where it comes in. Like people get seduced by the big picture or this idea, I'm going to be this big figure. And so I have to sacrifice this to get there. But at every point in the journey, you have to protect yourself. You have to be aware of what I really want and what piece am I going to give away. So I think what that moment's about is we're just trying to make sure you didn't give away too much of yourself in order to get to this spot. And self-respect is one of those things. You know, young men are unnaturally confident in their ability, I find. And I find young women, unfortunately, not confident enough. And I think that has a lot to do with how they're raised, everything. But certainly one of the things I've encountered in the media world is I've ended up mentoring more women than men, which I didn't expect because I always I'm going to look out for the brothers and help them out, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, a lot of young men are like, yo, man, I got this. You know, no, you're 23, you got it? Really? Okay. You know, that sense of overwhelm because they don't want to show any vulnerability.
And you mentor a lot of women because you're close with your mom. You've a complicated relationship with your father, obviously, which you write about in one of your memoirs. And you have a sister, and your sister has daughters. Like, so it's like you're like a girl dad in many ways, even though you don't have children, but you have that mentality of just you are surrounded by a lot of strong women.
I have been, and like my lady, she edited Ballerina's Tale. Leslie Norville,
Malika Whedon, is your editor,
right,
your lady,
yes, and we work on other stuff and helping her get her things done. There's a great producer, Leslie Norville. I work with on a number of the docs and stuff. Diane Paragas, who I did Brooklyn Bohemian with. Now she has her own film, Yellow Rose, that came out. Because of the nature of how sexism and misogyny, that these very talented young women come up, and there may not be a lot of places for them to get confidence. But let me tell you something. I mean, once you get a woman on your side, they'll ride or die. And then it's so great to see them go and do their own thing. Now I'm working on a project with Leslie, for example. We're going to do a multi-part series on history of Black Canada. And Leslie's the lead producer on it. I'm just like, the American guy helping her out. So it's great. As I'm saying about the thing about the journey, she worked on Brooklyn Boheme doing a tedious job for us of something we needed to do for the edit to get ready to take it to a cable company. We had to do this whole long edit of how many people were in the movie and how long they spoke. She knocked it out. I was like, whoa. And then over the next few docs, she took on more and more responsibility. Brooklyn Boheme and then Ballerina's Tale. And she really, really stepped up and got really great. Went to the Sundance Producers Lab. And now she's produced a bunch of stuff. She has a bunch of other docs she's produced. Now I'm working for her. And that's the journey, and that's about collaboration. But I'll always work with Leslie in some form, whether we're both partners or she's the boss, because I believe in her. And I think about this collaboration thing is not about you working with someone on everything you do. Like I worked with Chris Rock, CB4 is 93. Then we worked on the Chris Rock show. That was late 90s. Then I think we didn't work together again until 2008, 2009. We did the Good Hair documentary. Then I was on Top 5, which is a few years later. And then I think we're going to do something. I'll be involved in something else. But, that's the beauty of all of these relationships, that you come in and out. And every time you come back together, you bring some fresh information. And they bring some fresh information. They're in a different place in their lives. You're in a different place in your life. You guys all move forward. And I had a similar thing with Reginald Hudlin, the director of House Party. We worked on that doc for Clarence Avant for Netflix. I'm working on a script for him now. Oh, Alan Hughes brothers. I'd known them since they were 19. We actually never worked on anything, but we always had hung out, and I'd been sort of an older brother guy to them. And, now I work with them on the Tupac. They're doing a 5-part Tupac doc series that'll be out next spring. So one of the things about these relationships, almost all these relationships, most of them go back to that era in Fort Greene. Either they would lived in Fort Greene or I met them during that time when I was a journalist. And I just stayed in contact with them, whether we talk about what movies whack or what records whack or having these circles of people that you remain contact with. I'm always sad when there's people like a person that we have in common who doesn't speak to us anymore, right? Because we have such shared history. I don't have any, and I find it so wonderful when I run into friends. Last night I went out, had dinner at Mr. Chow's, saw a woman I hadn't seen in 20 years. It was great to see her. And I've been following her on social media. We caught up. It was great. And that's the other thing about the whole longevity thing. What you find is that people that you might have had rivalry with or beef with or whatever, over time, that shit all evaporates. Because if you manage to continue to move, because as you go on longer in your career, more and more of the people you started with are not around. They moved on to another career. Unfortunately, people are starting to die now. So anybody you see who's still, how you doing? I'm glad, you're happy. Remember back we were at Nell's in the back room in 1980? That was a great. I always tell people, like I was talking to Yahya, the actor who's now, he was Cadillac on The Get Down, and now he's in The Matrix, he's in Aquaman, he's become a big star. But, he was talking about building his community. And I said, yeah, that's it. Because the people you come up with in your 20s, if you're lucky, you're going to still know a lot of them in your 50s. In this case, in my 60s. And that those bonds are golden, and that shared history is golden. And you always never believe who you're going to end up working with in some form, based on just this shared kinship. So these generational things are very, the boomers had their thing. My girlfriend, Malika, says, you don't seem to judge people. And I think that's one of the reasons I've been able to continue moving is that I've had friends who did terrible things. I've had friends who've done heroic things. I've had friends who really, hit hard times. I've had people who died really badly and stupidly, quite honestly. And I've learned that me trying to pass judgment on their lives is ridiculous. I can't pass judgment on, not them. All I can do is see them and accept them as who they are and deal with them as thus. And that's why I've been able to, I think, continue to move, to continue to work, because unless there's a total asshole, like I said, avoid, if there's any sense of humanity, people make mistakes. And people also do great things, and they never do them again. Some people do one or two good things, and they do a lot of fucked up shit. So it's like, people are complicated, man. I guess that's the politics of being an adult. How do I move through this world with a quality of life, the least amount of bullshit, but also not make a ton of enemies that I don't need to make? You got to minimize the amount of people who really don't like you, because there will be people who don't like you. They don't give a fuck. You're not gonna do anything about that. They just don't like you. But it's a matter of don't give extra people a reason not to like you.
But it's so interesting that this conversation started off about, let's talk about art, but art comes down to people.
Absolutely.
Art is community. Community is art. It's all a life form. Like when I was writing Mr. Jones, this is from the perspective of a 27-year-old Welshman in the 1930s who went to Cambridge, a very different mindset than my own. And the way I was able to tap into that life is by saying things to people in my community, in my immediate space, through that screenplay that I couldn't necessarily say to their face. And so much of our art that we make is exercising a lot of the demons of these relationships and the demons within ourselves that the relationships force us to confront.
I mean, I did a movie for HBO called Life Support about a family that was dealing with someone who had HIV. And that was based on my family and my mother and my sister. And the idea of the whole film for me was the idea of the difficulty of forgiveness. And that's one of the things that we wrestle with always when we have people who have addictions or have had other, or even, committed crimes, is that they're in your family and you grew up with them, but they did some shit that's really bad, not just to themselves, but to other people. And so you can want to love them, but trying to get over that hurt, sometimes it can't be done. And it lingers just under the surface. So that was something I was definitely grappling with, just intellectually, but then emotionally. And the film definitely allowed me to do that. And I think that that's what art's really great at, is taking these incoherent feelings that are running through us and putting them in some kind of order. Why do we all love The Godfather? Because it's still about family, dysfunctional family, ultimately. It's a lot of with some cool suits and some guns. I mean, Citizen Kane is this great movie. It's about a guy who's totally, totally out of touch with his own inner emotional life and thinks that money and power will solve what's wrong with him, and it doesn't. In the whole movie, he's yearning for his childhood innocence that he never could reclaim. Citizen Kane's about capitalism, and you can name all of the big isms. It's about all of those things, but ultimately it's about a guy who just lost something and he's searching for it and he can't find it. We always go back to those elemental questions about who we are and, what is it that we need, or what is it we think we need, and then what is it we need, which are often, that's the contradiction that we have.
That's the tension of every story, every creative story and real life story. And so I want to ask you about Genius. So that brings us to the night you spent in New York City with Beyonce. I didn't get into Beyonce until Lemonade.
Right.
Because I loved how she became political.
Right.
And then I went back through her back catalog, and she's a genius. And you had this night with her and Jay-Z and other artists.
Right.
And you described her to me as being very shy. And that night, an artist that was a very, very big artist, who I won't name,
Right.
was among you.
Right.
And this artist had just come out with an album.
What was the song? What it
was a song.
Yeah. So what happened is that somehow I ended up on a boat going around Manhattan. It's a long story how I ended up on a boat with Jay-Z, Chris Rock was probably the reason I'm on the boat. Beyonce, Alicia Keys was there somewhere. Swizz Beatz was somewhere. And there's this other artist who we won't name, who's really great and who is a wonderful artist. So her and her manager were there in this table, and they wanted to play her new single. So they played a record. Throughout the night, not surprisingly, Jay-Z, was at the head of the table, and he was running things. And he had he's a great storyteller. You're good with Jay-Z talking. She sits there, and she's pretty quiet. She only talks a few times, really, in the course of a whole evening, and other people are rambling on and blah, blah, blah. So the record is played. And
the record by an artist that should not be named, just to be clear. It's not a Beyonce album. It's another artist. Yeah.
And she said, "What do you think?" And Beyonce, who's basically said maybe one or two things all night, goes, "Well, I think you should move the chorus. I think the chorus should be a verse, and then you should build that section up over here would be a better hook." I mean, she basically X-rayed the record in a way that was quite impressive. And they did it in a very boom, 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 boom way. And I was like, oh, shit. So the artist herself was like, okay. Because Beyonce's saying, the manager, however, when I did.
Being a typical protective manager, yeah.
Yeah, but he also was kind of like dismissive. And here's a woman who is one of the preeminent, hit makers of the era. You're playing her a record to get her critical judgment. She's given you unfettered, real stuff about what she thinks the record could do and how it could be better. And you're like, it's coming out next week, blah, 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 blah. You're kind of dismissing it and overwhelming, even if your client wants to hear it, apparently you're so invested in this record, maybe because who knows, maybe you're the reason, you may own the publishing. There was some deep investment in this particular arrangement that you're going to ignore what you had to say. Not, cut to the record flopped. Like seeing Beyonce think about how she approached what she did was pretty impressive. And she did it very, very offhandedly. She wasn't trying to be, here's my big idea. Like, well, I think you should blah, 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 blah. And all of it was really sound. Obviously, she's a Virgo like me, so yeah. Very analytical. It's interesting because, Michael Jackson is a Virgo. Well, I mean, I don't know if you're a horoscope person.
I'm a Taurus.
Okay, there you go. So I was like, okay, so there's...
Sarah, my co-host, is a Virgo, Taurus Virgo. We get along. Actually, you and Sarah have the same exact birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, September 1st. And I've known you guys, and I've been through some stuff with both of you guys for so long. So there's definitely something in the stars about that. And my sister's a Virgo. I'm surrounded by perfectionists.
Right.
Because that's my energy. That's what I bring as a Taurus, because we're the workhorses. We'll get it done no matter what.
So the analytical thing, I was really impressed with her analytical powers. And I think that's probably something that doesn't get it between the dancing and all the other visual aspects. The foundation goes back to writing. Like I think I said very at the beginning when we started sitting down, because song structure is a form of writing. Introduction, creating drama. What's the high point of the record? What's the high point of it's all a form of narrative. I guess maybe that's even a better way to put it. Because you at one point earlier said I do all these different things. And I really don't do a lot of different things. I do the same thing. It's just they're all narrative. And there are different techniques within a screenplay versus a teleplay versus a novel, sure. But they all are narrative. There's a story. There's a beginning, there's drama, there's conflict, there's love, and there's some kind of resolution. And that's true of all stories, whether it's a song or a play or a documentary. And there's usually, when it works good, there's usually a one central unifying idea with all these other kind of tributary ideas around it, So I actually think it's all the same thing. People say, well, you do a lot of different things. Well, I'm also only doing one thing at a time. When I'm working on Tupac and I have to do a pre-interview, I'm really zeroed in on what we need out of this person for the film. I'm working now, I'm doing a doc on Willie Mays. So I went down to Alabama. I spent a week in Birmingham, interviewed a 90-year-old man, a 92-year-old man, and a 96-year-old man, and a 74-year-old woman. I'm asking them stuff that happened 60 years ago. So you have to, be open to the fact that not every detail, according to your research, this happened. But you remember what happened last week, much less happened 30 years ago.
Right.
But trying to find a narrative, even in the interview, and you're trying to find a narrative. What are the pieces of this that only they can give me because they were there? I can interview a bunch of scholars, but like they were there. He sat next to Willie Mays in the dugout in 1948. What was that like? The other guy went to high school with Willie Mays. He showed me pictures of Willie Mays' high school girlfriend. Like, huh? What? So that's it. It's always about narrative, I think. It's always about a story.
What frustrates me as a writer is screenwriting is easy. I have a hard time with novel writing. Like I have a novel, been working on it for a million years. I feel like I can't seem to crack the novel writing code.
Now, is that because the thing about screenplays is that they're very structured?
Yeah, I love the structure. Because it's like the tourist in me just wants to build things.
Right.
And you build a structure, it's done. Novel writing feels a lot looser.
Yeah, well,
it's like there's no boundaries.
Yeah, exactly.
You can be into someone's head for a million I don't like it. I need the rules I need the structure.
Well, it's interesting because one reason I used to do, when I started out, I did sort of more freeform novels. I did a couple of love stories and stuff like that. Once I got into the doing noir-esque or stories, it was easier. You may need to take your story, put it in a genre. Genre writing, there are some rules. There is a villain of some kind. There is a series of obstacles that are to whoever the person is who's investigating. So genre, I love doing those. I don't know if I want to ever go back to just writing a novel.
Right.
And those also because when you do a series of books, like I've done these D. Hunter novels, there is continuity because I can bring characters back. There's relationships that happen, or, I'm always thinking, so last book, he was a bodyguard. Now, like those, in those books, he's gone from now a bodyguard. Now he has his own management company. He's a bodyguard in Brooklyn. Now he's got a management company in LA. So I would say one way to look at, even if you don't make it a straight up genre, now you might look at sci-fi or something like that, books as a way to create your world. Because the great thing about sci-fi is world creation. That's what those are really all about. And some of the best writing comes out of these genres because there are some things you need to put in there that are similar to a screenplay, I guess.
That's so interesting. So screenwriting, you are bound by the 3-act structure.
Well,
you got to have like the 90 to 120 pages. Like there's certain limitations. We're
commercial. I don't know. I always think that listen, there used to be the 5-act structure.
Right.
Sometimes I think that the 3-act thing is a noose. On one hand, the audience is used to it, so they're expecting certain things. On the other hand, it leads to predictability that can be like, oh, okay, she's coming back, and now, it's kind of. I think the 3-act structure is a noose as well. But go ahead.
Then how do you approach screenwriting?
I don't think I'm a really good screenwriter. Actually, I like the looseness better. That the room for digression that you have in nonfiction and novels. I think I'm better at that than I am at screenwriting. I find the form confining. See, like I find it confining, and I like the freeform stuff. I like the digressions that are a big part of definitely novels and a lot of nonfiction, where you have a moment where, okay, you can do a page about this woman's backstory and why she ended up where her family's from, and where she likes to buy her shoes, and you can really have fun and so we go back to the plot, but now you know everything you need about that character and her world. Whereas
in screenwriting, you need to sum that all up in one little pithy line of dialogue.
Yeah, and
I love that. I like just getting to the point, getting to the chase. With the novel writing, I'm like, oh, too many options, too many directions, too much freedom.
But that's the beauty.
Like the confinement of
and that's sensibility-wise. So and so what happens, and I say, what are you about? you will begin to gravitate to the thing that is the most convenient for you or most comfortable based on your skill set. And I think that that's the beauty of it, is that over time we try everything when we're young and we find out what we're really good at, or we evolve into it, gain some mastery, and then maybe then you might try and go back and do the novel. Maybe it's just not the right time for you.
What about documentary filmmaking? So I've written and directed one short documentary film. I'm writing a feature-length documentary film. Like, you really have to come in as a storyteller and build a narrative and tease people and build and just give them just enough. Just they know there's this issue and this issue exists and this is how it could impact you.
Well, I would say this. Is there a way to convey this information visually and not necessarily, before I did Ballerina's Tale, I did a bunch of more traditional kind of talking head docs. But, Ballerina's Tale, I had a person who moved for a living. So I wanted to have her move. I like she's going through the city. She's got a great mover. Why am I sitting her in front of a thing all the time? Misty should be walking around New York. She should be walking through Paris or Venice or Australia. We should see, because she's going to dance. She's a mover. So there's no point in this being a talking head doc. You should have some in, but it's got to be about her body. Like there's one of the best sequences in the movie. The two best sequences in the movie, she meets an older ballerina friend of hers who comes to see her. She's injured, and they end up kind of dancing together. Audience loved it because there's movement and they're kind of this idea of generations. That's when we went with her to a chiropractor, to an Italian chiropractor. So not only is he breaking her, cracking her bones, but he's also speaking another language and they can't communicate. So the sequences that had that were the best sequences in the movie. So there's always ways, but you do have to think differently.
So given the power of storytelling, does it even matter? Does art matter? Like, what's the point of art in our existence? And what's the point of anybody making art, whether they're going to be a Spike Lee or not a Spike Lee? So in the true essence of what art is, what service it provides, if any, like, why do we need art? Does art matter?
Try and tell somebody about your life without telling a story. Try and tell someone about the political situation in a place without telling a story. Try and tell someone how to fix their marriage without telling a story. We live with stories. Stories are who we are. Stories are how we communicate everything. And art is a heightened level of storytelling. So saying we don't need art is like saying we don't need storytelling. It's like saying we don't want to understand the world we're in. It's just that simple. We're storytellers, all of us. We learn from mommy, my thing got hurt outside. The guy hit me, and we're all telling a story. What happened? Well, what happened was, that's all art is. Art is the heightened, refined version of us telling a story to our mother to try and get a bigger lollipop. It really is. It's all art is a better version of that. So to say we don't need art is to say we don't need storytelling, is to say we don't want to talk to each other.
But what's the point of making art alone in your room if no one's ever going to see it?
You saw it, that you are somebody. So, I mean, there's some people who are fortunate enough to make pop, whether it's Spielberg or Michael Jackson, these big people who do global things. But that's an infinitesimal small number of people who do that. Most stories are told one-to-one. They're very intimate. And if people or you are moved by them, then they've done their job. That if they've changed your mood, if you made a piece of art in your living room that changed your mood or gave you a different perspective in your life, then it's done its job. Everything's not for everybody. That's one reason I love doing so many different styles. If I'm doing, I have a Substack, Nelson George Mixtape. So I put stuff up there that I want to put up. There's about a couple of hundred people who like it and they follow me and some of them give me money. That's fine. Or I work on, this Tupac thing. I'm sure it'll be a 5-part series on FX. It's Tupac and it's going to be a lot of media. It'll be a lot of coverage. So that'll be that. But each piece exists in a different plane and each piece exists to be received by people differently. And that's what it is. There is no art for everyone. No art is for everybody. No, it's not. Some art is for you, some art is for your friends, some art is for 20,000 people at the Madison Square Garden. It's all different. There's no one size fits all.
Does it matter in the world in terms of, can art save the world?
People save the world, not art. I don't think art is this elevated thing. It just informs how we perceive the world. So art is a tool for us to see. People have to change the world. Art doesn't. Art is only a vehicle. It's an expression of people. And so if it moves people, then people will internalize the lessons of the art and move. But the art itself, because the piece of art is all contextual. Your great song by Jay-Z may be incomprehensible to someone in India. Or the great Hindu work that's made in Chennai means nothing in Timbuktu. So art is very contextual. They talk about universality of art. We know something's beautiful when we see it, or we think, we have a feeling about it. But the context of the art is both crucially important and totally irrelevant. And that knowing more about why Stevie Wonder is great and coming from Motown, he's blind, and that informs a lot of that experience. But you can hear a Stevie Wonder song and hear the melody and think, wow, that's beautiful. And I don't know anything else about it, but I really like it. We always say, well, it can't be taken out of context. Well, yes, it can be taken out of context because most people don't, in their day-to-day life, do not have time to research where a song or a movie comes from. They just take it in and they either get something emotional out of it and then get curious, or they don't, or it just washes over them. I think it's harder and harder to make art or make storytelling that cuts through because there are more outlets, more voices. So I think that idea of what you're trying to achieve is very important. Are you trying to express something? Great. You trying to make $1 million or $2 million and maybe, Bitcoin? That's great, but that doesn't mean you're going to do it. You need to be accepting of the fact that the satisfaction comes from the creation. Once it goes in the world, you have no control. If you're not making it to satisfy something inside you and getting satisfaction out of that experience, then you're missing out on what the story is about.
Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up on our Patreon at the Truth Teller level or higher.
We want to encourage you to donate to your local food bank, which is experiencing a spike in demand. We also encourage you to donate to Oil Change International, an advocacy group supported with a generous donation from the Greta Thunberg Foundation that exposes the true costs of fossil fuels and facilitates the ongoing transition to clean energy.
We also encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Syria. Donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org. And if you want to confirm the fact that orangutan is pronounced correctly, go to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah Kenzie and Andrea Chalupa. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going. And you can also subscribe to us on YouTube.
Our production managers are Nicholas Torres and Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon exclusive content is edited by Carlin Daigle.
Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle.
Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher. Megan McNerney,
Sean Rubin,
Ton S. Pearlstein,
Pat,
Kenny Main,
John Schoenthaler,
Frank Jaquette,
Ellen McGirt,
Joel Ferron,
Larry Gasson,
Erica Moore,
Karen A. Deal,
Nico Phillips,
Brian E. Castor,
Lex Reed,
Andrea Scalzo,
Melissa Howland,
Jordan Sanders,
Ann Bertino,
Rachel Winder,
T.R. Dunstan,
John Millett,
Chris Ash,
David East,
Shannon Nacy,
Ida,
Chris Fellow,
Dodie Pop,
Kristen Bredimus,
Ben Wheaton,
Joseph Mara Jr.,
Rich Holcomb,
Thomas Scheibe,
Kelsey Malsom,
Julie Matthews,
Meganopolis,
Mark,
Matthew Womack,
Sean Berg,
Kristen Custer,
Tracy Ash,
Benjamin Galuza,
Kai Gillis,
Sharon Hattrick,
Irv Robinson,
Keith Gottschalk,
William Barry Reeves,
Richard Smith,
Emmy,
Kevin Gannon,
Sandra Cullmans,
Katie Masuris,
John Laughlin,
Jeff Thompson,
James D. Leonard,
Evan Rosemore,
Leo Chalupa,
Carol Gulstad,
Michael Woldridge,
Crimer, no criming,
the best, Jason Benke,
Joe Darcy,
Ann Marshall,
Jeremy Lewis,
Tweakvey,
Christine M.,
D.L. Singfield,
Nicole Spear,
Brian Tajudin,
Christy Vitale,
Maureen Murphy,
Michelle Dash,
Jans Alstrup Rasmussen,
Dorothy Kamarick,
Victoria Olson,
Alabama,
ZW,
Lisa LaFlame,
Jason Bainbridge,
Catherine Anderson Karina,
Sarah Gray,
Mike Tripico,
Diana Gallagher,
John Ripley,
Ethan Mann,
Jennifer Slavic,
Piet Yitzma,
David Porter,
Kate Cotton,
Kim Mellon,
Leah Campbell,
Lynn Schneider,
Jared Lombardo,
Karen Humphreys,
Giles Bucket,
Irina Guardia,
Eric Kaplan,
Sonia Bogdanovich,
and Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all for your support of the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.